Good morning, everybody. And I hope you're all having a wonderful Thursday morning. Nearly the weekend. We're almost there. Welcome to this WorkflowMax by BlueRock walkthrough for beginners. So this is your opportunity to sit back, hopefully with a cuppa, and to have a little look at this session while we go through the basic principles of using WorkflowMax by BlueRock within your business. My name's David Oliver. I work for Valued Academy, as is beautifully emblazoned at the top there. I am an implementation partner of WorkflowMax in all of its guises. I've actually worked with the old product for about a dozen years. I'm proud to be a foundational partner with BlueRock and looking forward to the future with this platform as it grows and develops. Every week we're seeing new things come into the system. We're seeing improvements and just moving forward with it to get it to be closer and closer to what everybody wants the system to be. I'm joined today by my wonderful colleagues from BlueRock. They're going to be helping us in terms of just answering questions as we go along. So Kaya and Natalie, thank you very much for your help with that today. But yes, we'll keep an eye on people coming in. We've got a good number so far, but there's a few more still joining, so we'll give them another couple of minutes. In terms of housekeeping, it's very simple. Although there is a Q&A opportunity at the end of the session, if you have any questions that you would like to have answered as we go through, please do pop them into the question and answer section in Zoom. As I said, we'll answer those for you as quickly as we can. If it's something that's worth bringing up on screen, and if we've got the chance and the time to do so, we'll answer that live as part of the session. But otherwise, it may be that it'll just be answered offline by Natalie or Kaya. As far as the rest of this today, as I said, it is fairly simple stuff. This is not rocket science. We're not asking you to have a degree in business management here. We're just going to go through some very simple concepts in terms of where a system like this fits into your business. We'll give it another minute or so for people to join, and then I think we'll crack on from there. Let's see where we get to. I think we'll make a start from there and see where we're at. So, moving swiftly on. The concept that we're looking at today is the idea of the life cycle. So within your businesses, you will all have a process that you follow in terms of winning work. How does it begin? In most circumstances, it begins with people. We are people, we buy from people, we sell to people. So it's your client that you're going to begin with. Now, that record within WorkflowMax can give you a lot of information, and it can be a great starting point in terms of bringing that together and giving you the platform to be able to then not only sell to your client, but also to build your job and your process within the system. Within the client record, you will be able to raise your quotation to your client. You will be able to then detail that, send it to them in a customized document if need be. And once that has been accepted by the client, it will become a job record within the system. That job record, again, very flexible in terms of its content, able to reflect your process and the work that you undertake with your clients. And then moving on from there, we've got the various concepts that follow. So that idea of potentially a deposit invoice. Invoicing itself, you can see we also have a final invoice at the end there. Invoicing is quite a broad concept within WorkflowMax. We've got several different ways in which you can invoice your client, but the deposit invoice prior to beginning the work is indeed one of them. We've got the idea of purchase orders, so purchasing from your suppliers if there's anything that you need that is not time related. It might even be time related if you're employing freelancers, etc., but it's not to do with sort of time recording within WorkflowMax itself. Time and time recording within WorkflowMax is generally held for your employees, the people who are working directly for you. And again, both non-time related items and time within the system, all able to be then invoiced to your client, either in stages or as a final invoice at the end of your delivery. We've also then got that concept of reporting upon your progress. So this is essentially a great key to the whole thing. One of the main reasons that we record information is so that we can then report upon it. And again, without those reports, we're only really looking at half a solution there. So that concept that these not only take place once we've concluded our work, but they act as a yardstick as we work through the process with our clients is very, very important indeed. So again, as part of what we will see, we'll certainly see the flexibility of those reports and where they come into play as part of this process. It's also worth noticing that there are a number of other systems that can connect in to WorkflowMax as well. So WorkflowMax can certainly deal with a large portion of your process, but you can then expand upon that with a number of key partner add-ons as well. Probably the most common among those is going to be Xero. So in terms of your financial management, your bookkeeping, and potentially even just that interaction with your clients from an invoice point of view, then Xero is probably by far the most common integration with WorkflowMax. But as you can see here, there are a host of other names that will service you in other aspects of managing your process, whether it be managing your documents, whether it be dealing with your pre-work and your CRM functions, whether it be dealing with your scheduling. There's all sorts of capabilities with these attendant products, not least the fact that the system is also available on a platform called Zapier, which allows you to then build custom connections with other applications that are available on that platform. So again, very, very useful in that sense. It's also worth noting at this stage, there are other elements within WorkflowMax itself that you can take advantage of. So WorkflowMax Standard is obviously an entry level. It's where you would begin. But then there are also the options of WorkflowMax Premium. So if it's a case that you need greater insight into the capacity of your staff members or their productivity, etc., then indeed Premium is a very, very useful and cost-effective upgrade to your standard subscription. The second is the lead module. So right now we're dealing with the concept of a client who potentially could be either already working with us or may not be. The idea of the lead module, it splits this concept of a client into a client and a prospect. And again, from there, you can create your leads for your prospects. And once those leads have been firmed up, they can also have quotes attached to them. And when a quote or a lead is won or accepted, then that prospect record converts into a client record at that point. We'll not go into those sort of extras in any detail in this session today. This is a session for beginners, for basics. But again, any questions around those, let us know, and we can always either answer those here, or there will be future sessions that will go into these aspects of WorkflowMax in much more detail. So let's move on. We're going to move across into the product very, very shortly in terms of going through our process. So we're going to begin with clients. And we're going to see exactly what it is that we can do with our clients in the system. So I'm just going to move into my demo environment, and we're going to see what Value Demo can provide us with. You'll see that in your dashboard, you've got your green toolbar at the top. This appears in all screens within the system. What we will see is that clients is front and center within that green toolbar. So accessing our client list is very, very easy. And from there, we've got all of those clients who we're either working with or we're trying to work with at this point in time. You can also see that we have certain ones of them flagged as favorites. Literally these small stars, if I was to click onto favorites, then you would see that that list would thin out and produce only the list of my favorite clients. Now, I'm sure you would say we shouldn't have favorite clients, but we all do. There will, for whatever reason, whether it be that these are the ones that we are working with actively at the minute, or whether it be these are the ones that are have high priority work, whatever it might be, it just makes them easier to find within your list. If we have clients that we are currently not working with, we don't need them at this point in time, we can select them and we can archive those, and then they are just not cluttering up our main list. We haven't deleted them, but it just means that we've then got those if we ever do work with them again. We can go to the archive, we can restore them to full capacity, and we can work with them once again. So what does a client record offer us? Well, I'm going to create a new record so that we can then see how this might appear for you. So once we get our initial contact from our new client, we click into New Client or Create New Client, and it is essentially a form filling exercise. So we would begin with the name of the client. Let's go Lightspeed Engineering, and who is going to look after this new prospect? You can see that we've got the idea of a client manager and a job manager. Now, these are defaults. They will always be then put in place when we are creating work for this client. We don't have to select them at this stage. In fact, the only compulsory information that we've got in the beginning is the name of the client. But it does help us if we then assign this to somebody to give them essentially somebody to look after them. I'm going to assign this to myself for obvious reasons. We can, if we are using the premium version, deal with a business structure. We can, in both standard and premium, deal with a client type. So in this case, I've got payment on order. We'll put that in. This client type is customizable. So as a list, you can put in anything that you want in there and segment your client database however you wish to. Phone numbers, absolutely fine. Fax numbers, well, it's still there as a field. I know we're in the 21st century, but you never know. Somebody might still have a fax somewhere. It's probably in an attic somewhere, but it might have a number still. We might have a generic info at email address. Info at cakemail. I can't even spell fakemail.com. We then might have a website for the client, and we might want to say where they've come from. So in terms of a referral source, we can certainly add details into that field just to say where we've received that particular prospect from. Addresses, very simple. So again, we can do a quick find. This works in certain cases. I'm just going to type in an address right now, 99 the Avenue. Town might be Durham, where I'm based, and we'll leave it at that for now. We can see that we can copy that to a postal address as well. If we are using premium, then we may have the ability to include things like a VAT number, a company number, and a year-end month. We'll ignore that for now. We don't really need that in most cases. Is the client VATable? So are they zero rated for VAT? Do we need to charge VAT to them when we raise our invoice? If they weren't VATable, I could tick that box, but if they are VATable, I will leave it alone. You can also see that I've got some custom field information in here as well. So has the client signed up to our newsletter? If that's the case, I can tick that box and we've got that information in the system. We'll talk a little bit about custom fields in just a moment. In terms of other billing details, we'll not go into these too much right now, but this sort of hints at the flexibility of WorkflowMax. What we have are capabilities where, for example, you do not have to bill this client directly. Maybe their invoices need to go to another client. If, for example, they're a franchise and the franchise has a central billing office, then again, you can set that up as a client within your system and you can invoice them for this particular client. Similarly, we potentially have custom rates for different tasks that we can apply to clients as well. Depends on how we set up the system. If you're a professional services business, the likelihood is that you're actually using staff rates, and those staff members can have custom rates as opposed to the clients and as opposed to these tasks. But again, we keep it simple at this stage and we'll just work with the default rates that we will see in a moment. So let's just save our client record and we'll see what that then looks like. So here we go. It's brought us back to our client list. If I now search, I can easily search for Lightspeed. And as soon as I've put in at least 3 characters into my search, it will find it for me. And there is Lightspeed Engineering. So we see the details that we've got there already. If I was to click into the client record, there it is. So first of all, we've got our overview information. So this is very simple stuff. We've got any details about their contact information, their websites, etc. We've got their addresses listed below. You can see that their billing address has a Google Maps search as well. So again, great functions within there to take advantage of. At the minute, though, we've just got the details of the company itself. We do not have the details of the individual. Now, bearing in mind that I've created this as a company, the client that you're dealing with might well be an individual. If it is, that's fine. We don't really need anything more. But if it is a business, then it's always good practice to then put in the details of the people that we're dealing with at that business. So I'm going to add a contact. Now, it's not an existing contact. I could go and search for a contact that already exists within my system. So if this is somebody dealing with us who has multiple businesses, we don't need to replicate that contact record multiple times. But in this case, we're going to put in somebody brand new. So let's put in the name. We'll start with the first name. We'll put this in as Chris, I don't know, French I don't know why French, it's just come to mind. We'll do it. He's the director, so the MD. Salutation would be Chris. Maybe his full name there is Christopher. And from there, we've got the addressee, Mr. French. And we've got his personal phone number or mobile number and email address as well. And is this the primary contact? Yes, indeed. And do we want this person included in emails that we send to the client? Yes, we do. So there we go. So we've got all of that information captured. I mentioned about custom fields before. You'll see if I move over onto the next tab within the record. By the way, there is Christopher and his details. If I click onto details here, we'll see that we're then looking at not only that front page information to an extent, we've also got our custom field information there as well. Now, this is the client record as a whole. We can also have custom field information against our contacts as well. So if there's a need to record something unique about your contacts, maybe it's a beverage preference, maybe it's a time zone, whatever it might be, you can include that sort of information in the contact record as well. So again, I haven't shown you how to build these yet. We'll maybe have a little look at that in a bit. This is more about the introduction of the concept at this stage. The main use of the details tab is for editing. So what we can see here is that right now, the information for the client is available to us straight away. So if I needed to change anything on here, if I needed to add a client manager, if I needed to add a fax number, if I needed to update their payment details or their client type, I can change any of this information just within this screen without doing anything else. If I make a change, if I then save my changes, all is well, and we can move on from there. So it's really a very easy screen to use. You can see that we have other tabs within the client record as well. So any attendant records to this client, we will be able to access from their client record. If we're using the lead module, then their leads will appear here. Otherwise, we have their quotes, their live jobs, their invoices, and indeed any notes or documents that we've then added to this client record. So it might be that at this early stage, I'm just recording the fact of what's happened. So I can instantly put in the details here. I can create a new note. I can call this initial call, spoke to Chris about the job. And again, I can save that into the record and it will sit there for us quite happily. So looking at that, we've now got this saved for posterity. If anybody needs to know who first spoke to Chris, it will be detailed there. It will say who added this note and when, and it's just a really good repository. In terms of any documents, let's say we've, I don't know, sent our prospectus to Chris, then again, we might want to upload a copy here. If Chris has sent us a, I don't know, a diagram of what he needs us to do, we could save that here as well. This is all client level information, really. So I would say think about what you're putting in here, because we will say shortly, we also have notes and documents in jobs as well. From the client record, we then have actions that we can perform. So we can then see we can create a number of these records. So whether I want to create a new lead, a new quote, a new job, I can do it within here. There are other places that we can do this as well. So you can find that within jobs themselves, our list of jobs within the system, if we just have a very brief look at that jobs list, I can also create a new job within here as well. If it was a case that I was in any of the other areas in the system under the business drop-down, if I was in leads, I can create a new lead. If I'm in quotes, I can create a new quote. Invoices, purchase orders, all similar in their approach to this, that we can create those records from within the individual screen itself. I'll just come back to our client record for now. Notice that, again, I'm on a browser, so I can use my forward and back arrows quite comfortably. I'm going to create our quotation within here. So when I click onto new quote, it's then giving me essentially a blank page. What is this about? What am I doing? Well, it's not assuming that my contact is the one that we need to include. It might be a new contact, somebody else. I'm going to choose Chris for now anyway, but I could have created a contact separate to Chris and added that in here. I can always go back and view the client through this link as well. So it's always just a matter of flicking backwards if I need to look at the client record for any reason. We can see I have a choice between a quote or an estimate. This again is of no practical difference in terms of the system, but depending upon how you operate, if you actually raise estimates to your clients, you can call them estimates within the system. So that's absolutely fine. We're going to give the quote a name. So what is it that we need to work on? New shop fitting items. And we can then see on the right-hand side who the salesperson is who's dealing with them. So this again helps us to track from a point of view of sales records, etc. But it's a new function within the new platform. So it's always nice to see things like this coming in. The most important one here, I would say, is that we have the concept of a template. So yes, we can build our quote from scratch if we want to, but we don't have to. If we do the same work day in and day out, we can use templates to physically help us put this information together. So you can see I have a series of templates in here. I'm going to use strip out and enabling. Now notice what that's done. That's overwritten the name of my job. So do choose your template first, just so that you're not then losing the name that you want to put in place. So I said this was shop fit out. Right, we are. I can then put in a description of what we're going to do for our client. So this is what we will be doing. And from there, I can put in a budget. Now, this budget is just a number. It can be used as a comparative in a number of ways. Possibly one of the better ways to use this is as a yardstick for your quotation. So if I said that this is going to be 10,000, then I can put that in as my budget. And we'll see as we build our quotation, whether it's coming close to that figure or even exceeding that figure in terms of what we hopefully are going to charge the client. We can see when the quote is going to be valid from and when it's valid to. If it goes past this date, it will be classed as an expired quote. It's not the end of the world. You can still resurrect that. You can still change it, still accept it, but it will be managed under a section for expired quotes. And we can have certain items within our quote classed as optional, whether they be tasks or costs, and we'll see what tasks and costs are very shortly. But again, we could say that they are either mandatory as part of what we're offering the client, or it's optional and they can choose it almost like an extra. If I click next, we will then see that information presented to us. So we're going to see at the top of our quotation, we've got all of that there present. Once again, we've got that inline editing capability, so I can always make amendments to this as I see fit, right up until the point that I issue this quote. There's my description, there's my optional explanations, and you can see that we've now got tasks and costs within our quotation. We've also got a summary at the bottom. So right now, my template gave us the fact that we've got an installation task. It's giving us a rate, but it's not giving us a number of hours. Now, this task is what my own employees will be performing. This is the time-related element. So when they're recording their time, whatever I put in here as an estimate of time is what we're going to be monitoring against to see whether they come under or over the estimate that I've put in place. So I'm going to click into my task and I'm going to state a number of hours. I'm going to say that's going to take 30 hours to complete. There's my billable rate. Right now, the billable rate is looking at the task itself to say how much do you usually charge for this task. When we come to physically perform the task, then depending upon the settings we've got in the system, if we're looking at task rates, it will follow this rate that we've got here. However, if we're looking at staff rates, then this average figure is not what the actual calculation will be based on. It will be based on the rates of our staff who are performing the work. So if it's a case that we have some really advanced staff and we charge a lot for them, it may be that they need less time to do the work. It may be that if they spend more time doing the work, we might blow our budget. But at the same time, if we had more junior staff performing the work, maybe they don't cost quite as much as this to the client. So again, it may be that they can take a little more time to do this, or indeed, if they bring it in the right amount of time, we might actually make some more profit. So lots of things that we can consider with regard to that. The time that I've put in when I save this, we'll see that that's coming back to our quotation. And it's now producing a value. So we've got 2,250 for this particular task. If I wanted to add in further tasks, so I can always amend what I've had from my template, I can click into my task and drop down lists, and I can pick something else that I might want to include. Now I've got all sorts of tasks within here, so goodness knows, let's just pick a design task for now. And again, I might add 10 hours of design. The idea of a label is an interesting one. If I have several tasks of a similar nature, I don't have to have every single permutation and combination created within this list, I can actually then make each of those unique by the addition of a label. So design, this might be shop floor. And from there, I can then give a description to this task as well. This is what the floor will look like. Please forgive my rudimentary descriptions. We'll talk about phases in just a bit, but then we can see if I click on the drop down here, I do have phases that I can assign my work to. They work a lot like folders. We can see whether this is a billable task or whether it's not billable. And we can also see whether it's optional as well. So that idea that it might be something as an added extra that the client might choose or that they may not choose. A billable rate I can place in. So again, we might charge 100 for design per hour. And we can see that again, we've got our taxable values there as well. You also have the concept of adding staff at this point in the process. So if I want to assign people at this early stage, I can do. What it will do is it will override any task rate with their staff rate at this point, if I'm using those staff billable rates. I'm not going to assign anybody just now. We're just going to base it on the rate that we've got here. And let's see what that then produces for us in our quotation. So once again, 10 hours at £100 an hour. We can see that there we've got that. Notice that we have no base rate. What is a base rate? A base rate is just that. It is the cost to us of this time. So where on this first one, we've already got £50 per hour as a base rate, we've got £75 as a billable rate. So for every hour that is included here, we're essentially making £25 profit. Right now, we've got half a record as far as design is concerned. In the background, it is not stating a base rate. So right now, it looks like this is entire profit. That's not really where we want to be. So what I would suggest is that if this was my quotation, I'd want to go and set a base rate against my design task before I then include it in my quotation. This is all about making sure that my profit margin is maintained as accurately as possible. So I'm predicting the right level of profit on my job, because we just want to make sure that we're not overcommitting or indeed cutting into the profit margin that we intend to make. There's my slider. If I do want to make that optional, it's entirely up to me. You can slide it on or off. You can also then see, as we look at the right-hand side, I can order these in any order that I want. So if I want the design first and then the installation second, I can have that. You can also see that this header is my folder. This is my phase. My strip out is what I've got there at the minute. Now, if I wanted to manage these phases, I can do so. And you can see it says manage phases just there. If I click onto that, it will take me through to a separate screen. And as we see this in a moment, come on, Workflow, you can do it. I think it might have just lost me there. Let's just back up out of that. There are other ways to get to where we want to be. So for example, I can click onto the phases tab at the top. And again, we'll cross our fingers. This should come through. There we go, to the phases. So you can see what is now included in my strip out phase in terms of both tasks and costs. You can also see if anything is not assigned to a phase, it will be under this unassigned option. I'm actually going to add another phase in, going to add in a design phase, or let's call it a concept phase. Why not? We'll just keep it something different. Concept. So I can give it a description. This will define the project. And I can add that into my quotation. What I then have the ability to do is to click into strip out or into unassigned and say, well, is there anything there that I want to move? Well, design doesn't belong in strip out. I'm not going to delete it. I'm actually just going to reassign it. I'm going to put it into concept, at which point you'll see concept will then appear with one item in it. I'm also going to then move concept up. So when it comes back, I'm going to move concept above strip out so that it appears first. I'm also going to then use move my two unassigned items into concept as well. So we're just going to take those. We're going to take those two. We'll try that again. And we're going to assign those into concept as well. So once we've put everything into its proper place, when we come back to our details tab within our quotation, we'll see that we've got those phases listed and we've got our tasks and our costs exactly where they're supposed to be. We'll see about that just now. So here we are back on that front page. There's our concept. There's our strip out. There's our concept for costs, and there's our strip out for costs as well. Now, these costs, again, are predefined. Rather like the tasks, they exist in a list in the background. We can add additional items on the fly as we go. So if I now want to add a unique cost, let's say this is, I don't know, printing. Then I don't have printing, oh, coupon printing, that's not what I want. I want to just say printing. So I'm going to click on Create Printing. This will add it in as an item. I can then say what my quantity is. There might be only one. And say what my unit cost is. Maybe it's 100. I can see my unit cost to me actually would be maybe 50. But my quantity there, I can do what I want with that. This I'm also going to add into my concept phase. And from there, if I had a supplier, any cost is potentially something that can be bought in. So this, again, I could, if I wanted at this stage, to state a supplier, although at this early stage, I might not know who that would be. We do have the idea of whether a cost is a service item or a stock item. Let's give a little bit of context to that. This is the idea whether we just want to receive the bill from the supplier for this eventually, or whether we might need a separate ability to receipt in the physical item itself. So it's a case that, let's say the printed matter received came in first, and then we received the bill later. I might want to include that as a stock type item, and that way I can differentiate between the two. You can see it's billable, it's not optional, it's VATable. If I had any notes, this is the printing for the job. We'll see where that appears. So all of this is just adding information that your client can then use to assess what you're doing or what you're offering them in terms of the project that you're putting to them. We can see there that we've then got our values at the bottom. So right now, my total cost in terms of everything here, you can see that my billable value, my subtotal is 9,625. So compared to my budget, I'm actually just under at this stage. I'm quite satisfied with that right now. I think that's about where I want to peg it. You can see that I've got my profit calculation as well. Now, remember, my profit is slightly askew because I don't have my cost value, my base rate for my design task. But right now, it says that I'm making a margin of 31%, a total profit of £3,055. I can save this as a draft if I wish to, or alternatively, I can issue this to the client as well. There is a little drop down there. You can go straight ahead and issue and accept if you want, but that is, again, just where we're doing this after the fact. I would say really at this stage, the most common action would be to issue this quote. Issuing the quote fixes its content. So right now, that has now brought me back to the client record. You can see under my active quotes, my quote is sitting right there as issued. So if I want to access that quote again, you can see I've got all of my different options here. Is it draft? Is it issued? Has it been revised? Has it been accepted, declined, or is it expired? So very easy to monitor and manage my quotations within this section of the client record. I'm going to click through into it again. And what I'm going to do at this point is look at sending that to my client. Well, I can click into Print PDF. And at this point, I have some options. So first of all, whatever my default quote is, let me just get back to that, is essentially the starting point. So this is an unadorned quote. It's a very simple looking document. If I'd uploaded my logo into the system, it would appear at the top right-hand corner. But really all it is a simple version of the information that you're then presenting to your client. You can see on the right-hand side of this system default that we have options available to us. What do we want to include? Do we want to show our phases? So we want to group tasks and costs by phase. We want to show the phase description. Maybe we want to show the individual tasks and costs within there as well. So we can do all sorts of things like that. If I click generate again, it will take that information into account and it makes a change to what we see. So there's my concept phase, there's my strip out phase, and you can see the attendant tasks and costs within each of those as well. Do we want to print our totals excluding tax? Because this is just a quotation at this point, we can do. You've got the amounts across these various things. Do we want to include, say, notes on tasks or descriptions on costs, etc.? We can do all sorts of things with regard to that as well. So again, as I just simply add this information in, you can see it's expanding on the content that I'm then sending to my client. If I'm happy with what I've got, I can then send it. I can click on send. It will bring up the email. You can see it's already included that initial email address, but I could then add in further email addresses if I wish to as well. You can see the attachment is sitting there, and I can start to type in my message. Hi, Chris. Here is our quote. And you can then add further attachments to this email as well. So if you've got schematics, if you've got diagrams, documents, contracts, whatever it might be, you can add those into this email and send those along as well. It's entirely up to you. What we can do with this print PDF screen is we can choose other versions of our quotation. So here I have a test quote. If I choose that, notice my options have all disappeared. But that's because these are based on a merge document, a Word document. And this is configurable to be anything that we want it to be. So right now, we can see this is now a very, very different layout to this quote. Thank you very much to my friends at PF&A Architects. We can see that we've then got everything in there that we might want to present to our client. It might be terms and conditions. It might be a list of our expenses. And indeed, it is the content that we do want to send through. So that, not as customizable on the initial instance as that default template, but as I said, we can tailor those documents beforehand to include everything that we want to. So you may find that you end up with quite a range of different custom templates that you can use in different circumstances. Right now, we can export this now as a CSV file. We can export it as a PDF if we want to physically print it and give it to our client or attach it to an email externally from WorkflowMax. Although why you would want to do that, I don't know. Maybe because this sends from a WorkflowMax email address. That's the only thing I can really say about that. But yes, this is our quotation now in the hands of our client. So coming back to the quote itself, if I want to view the client, click onto View Client just above there. And again, I'm taken back to my client record. You can see there is a number 1 next to my quotes. So I can easily go and have a look at that quote again in here. If I'm reviewing my quotes overall, I do have that list within the records here as well for quotes. So I can easily go into that master list and I can see where all of my quotes are currently at. I've got my drafts, my issued quotes. Again, you can look at those in any manner that you want. You can add your filters in from here to filter by client manager or by salesperson, etc. There's all sorts of things that you can do within this list. So let's come back to our client and look at the quote there. At this point, I might want to say, right, my client is ready to accept this. Or it may be that they want some changes made. If I do want to make changes, all I would do is I would click on Revise at the bottom. Now, this would then essentially archive this original quote, and it would give me a new quote with a separator. So instead of quote 125, we might have quote 125/1, and that would be our first revision of our original quote. So we can always go back and change something if we need to, but rather than changing what we've got here right now, you can see this is all fixed at this stage, we would then revise the quote and amend it as such. Other than that, they might decline the quote, but here we're going to say that they have accepted. So once they accept the quote, this is going to then begin the process of pushing this through as a job record. You can see that we've now got a job number at the top of our record. It's showing us that within Lightspeed Engineering, this is a job, and we're currently talking about it being called Shop Fit Out. Remember, that was the name of the quote that we used. So we can see that we've now got our estimated hours against the job. That's what came through from our 30 hours plus our 10 hours. We've got our projected profit within there. We'll talk about that another time. But you can see then we've got a number of days to complete the job, a number of tasks to complete, and a number of remaining hours in which to do so. You can also then see that we've got sections for our tasks. You can collapse any of these, by the way. You can really shorten what you're looking at. Our general job information, exactly what we had. We've got a budget of 10,000. The description has pulled through. We can see who the contact on the job is, etc. If we do have a purchase order from our client, we can add that in, and that will be their purchase order number. You can see that we've also got a status of the job as well. So currently it's planned. Now, again, there are default statuses when you first get the system, but you can add to these. So a number of these are very much customized options for me. Here, I'm just going to put it as in progress. We can also categorize the work as well. Now, the template that we used to create the quote might indeed have included a category. Here, it didn't, so I'm now going to choose a category for it. And again, we have this concept of custom fields. So not only at client level and at contacts within the client, within the job record, we can also have custom fields as well. It's actually worth noting you can have custom fields in a lot of places. Even in the quote, you can have custom fields as well if you need to. This is just a case of filling in things if it is useful. Excuse me. Beg your pardon. So this is all about making it relevant to the job that you're about to perform. So for example, if I know what the project type is, or if I know who the architect who's working on this, I can add that information in. We can see we've got a schedule for the job. Now, again, we haven't changed anything with regard to this just yet. So right now, the job believes that it's only going to take a day. I might say that it's going to take 2 days and it's going to finish tomorrow. Very easy to pick that from the list. We've then got our priority. Well, it's a 2-day job. Is it a normal priority? Maybe it's a high priority. So I'm going to just advance that a little. We can see these priorities and filter by them within our jobs list. So when we're looking at that overall jobs list for us, where it's not just in one single client, it can help to then have a priority and be able to look at what is important to you most immediately. We can see also that we've then got the client manager and the job manager. So I can state these within here. And again, that's absolutely fine. We can use these kind of like a hierarchy. Do I need to put the same person into both fields? Not really. If there was somebody above me who we then were assigning this to, we could put it in, and that's absolutely fine. But you can also see who the staff members are who are assigned to this job. So if we had a list of people who we wanted to be able to work on this, we would add them in from this list. And again, that would be everything that we needed. We can see that we've got our tasks and costs. So as we look at these in detail, we can see exactly what we've got. We've got our task with its description underneath. We've got our costs with their descriptions underneath. Right now, we can see that these are estimated costs. How do we know that? Well, this actual column that we have here, this little slider is not in the green. If it's in green, it's an actual cost. We've committed to it. We know what that cost is for sure. If we haven't had that cost through yet, then like as not, it's probably an estimated cost. You can see we're looking at all costs right now. You can look at just actual or just estimated costs if you wish to. And you can also search for costs in this list as well. So if you're looking for particular types of cost by name, you can find them here. In both cases, both tasks and costs, we can add to these lists as we go. So if we need to add further costs or more tasks and more time into this that weren't part of our original quote, we can certainly do so. In fact, we may choose to do so in general if we then need to requote for this later on. If we need to raise a new quote after we've made some additions to those lists, then we can absolutely do so through job actions by raising a new quote. So again, easy to update this and keep it as a true reflection of what your client is being asked to agree to. You can see that if we're managing phases, we do have that phases tab within the job, just as we did within our project, our quote record. So again, you can see we've still got concept, strip out, and unassigned with those same details visible within them. So again, very, very easy to catch up with that and see what it gives us. We have other tabs within these jobs as well. So for example, if people have been entering their timesheets, we've got that timesheet tab that we can look at. If we've got milestones, simple deadlines within our project, then we can see those within the milestones tab. Right now, we have nothing. To add a milestone, it is very easy. All we need to do is give it a date and a description. So this might be design phase completed. And it wasn't the design phase, it was concept, wasn't it? Concept, there we go. We can assign that to a phase. I'm going to put it to concept, and I'm going to save that there. So again, it's just a line in the sand, a date that I know I need to hit to be on track with regard to this. I mentioned before, you have you have notes and document tabs within here as well. So once again, you might put a note in, and it might be that we did site visit I'll come here. Try again, site, visit, and we visited the site. Okay, I told you I'm not that inventive today. That might be under the concept phase, so we could take some measurements or something like that. But again, I can record that within my record here for the job. What we can then do is that record exists, and we can just continue to add further notes as we go through. Likewise with documents, if we've got, let's say, photographs of the sites or plans that we've drawn up, we can add those into here as well. So we can have all of these documents listed and in relevant phases as well, so that these are easily found, identified, used, etc. So this is just one way of doing this. Remember, there are other products that can bolt on to WorkflowMax if you need expanded functions for the likes of storing your documents. So again, things like suite files, things like Google Drive, you can use those to give you extra features and functions within these areas. Finally, within here, we have the financial tab. Now, this is where our financials information is gathered together. So if we've got any outstanding items of task or cost that need to be invoiced for, we can do that here. If we have our quotation or estimate, it will be listed here. The green one is the active quote, the one that the job is currently based off. Likewise, if we've got our invoices or purchase orders, they will also be nestled in this financial tab as well. So again, we can see everything at a touch of a button in terms of how this project is progressing from a financial standpoint. We do have financial settings in the job. This is just telling us the basis on which it's working. This should reflect your default settings by default. That's a kind of oxymoron. You've then got there, it's by staff billable rate, and you can see that my rate currently is set as 90. So as far as that's concerned, I could set a custom rate for myself if I needed to. I don't need to in this case. Coming back to the job, we'll see that we've then got everything we need to begin working on it. In terms of recording time, one of the easiest options is the timer. This is available in the toolbar at the top, so it's always visible on screen. I can easily click into it. I can physically add an amount of time, or I can start the timer away, whatever I prefer. It's entirely up to you. But I'm just going to enter something for the moment. I'm going to say I've done 2 hours. I'm going to bring up my job. This is for shop fit out. And there's my job. Within my job, I then need to select my task. So I'm going to say this was spent on design. It's billable. You'll notice that next to design, it's telling you which phase this work takes place in. So that's helpful. I can also add my notes in. I did the designs. And I can save that into our record. Now, what we will see is as soon as I click back onto my details tab within the job, watch the time. I've spent 2 hours. And I've got 38 hours remaining. So of my 40 hours on the job, I'm now starting to see I'm 5% through my allotted time, essentially. Again, I've still got 2 tasks outstanding. If I look down at my tasks, you can see that this meter is now starting to fill up. It's starting to add in the time that I've already spent. So of the 10 hours I had available, I've spent 2. If I wanted to look at my timesheets, I can click on that timesheets tab, and I've got that in here as well. So there is the detail. If I needed to, we have a further level of detail that we can access, and this is called to-dos. These exist if I click through into the job, the task itself. I can find to-dos as a tab, but I can also click onto our little cog icon there, and I can surface these on the front page as well, which makes it very, very useful. So you can configure the columns that you see here quite easily. Doing so, let's see what we've got. So right now, I don't have any to-do items, but this might be take measurements, produce designs, client, sign off. And literally, these are just tick box options. Have I taken the measurements? Yes, I have. Have I produced the designs? Yes, I have. At this stage, this might be putting me ahead of the game. If I was at my full 10 hours and I'd only done 2/3 of these things, I might be somewhat worried. But right now, I'm quite happy with where we're up to right now. So what else can I do? Well, I can look at my costs and I can raise my purchase orders. So if I'm needing to buy something in, I can go to my job actions, raise a new purchase order. I can say who the supplier is that I want to buy my item from. So here I'm going to pick ABC Limited. I can see which of these items I want to deal with. So my materials, I'm buying my materials from them. And when I go next, I can then see this in the content of my purchase order. Now, I might have added some delivery details, 99 the Avenue. And I can see that I've got my item in there. I can look and make sure that it is everything that I need, make sure I'm happy with my narrative, etc. And if I'm happy with this, I can issue my purchase order. Now, once I've issued the purchase order, this will then be visible on that front page. So when I come back to the job fit out, if I look at my cost item itself, the materials, we'll see that, let's come back to the details. We'll see that that is then showing what we've got underneath. So there we've got our purchase order listed just there. But as we said before, that is also sitting in our financial tab as well. What I would then be doing is receipting in my purchase order. So at this point, because it is a stock item, I've got a couple of, well, this one might not be, this might be just a service item. So we might only have the bill to receive. So at this point, I can add my bill. I can put in the bill number from my supplier. So we'll see that come through. So there is my compulsory bill number. I can put in the due date of that, might be next work Thursday, and I can make sure that I'm happy that the value here is the value that appeared on my bill. If there were any additional lines on the bill, I can add those in as well, and they would also become costs within my project, even though they weren't part of my quote. So I can save that, and we'll see what happens to my materials as a cost within my job. So as I come back to my job itself, so I'll come back to the details side of my purchase order, come back to my job itself, so click into the job, and what we will then see when it comes up is that I've now got an actual flag against that cost. So now that I've receipted it in, we know that that's how much I've paid for that item. Anything that is an actual cost and anything that was actual time will flag then against my estimated billings. Now, I can run my estimated billings in one of two ways. I can usually, probably one of the nicest is I can look at my actuals, which is what I'm doing here, or I can look at my unbilled elements from my quote if I prefer. Personally, I keep it as actuals, but it is a choice that you can make. We're now looking at that idea of then raising our invoice for the work that we've done. If I go into job actions once again, you can see I have choices between a progress invoice and a final invoice. So if I was to raise a progress invoice, I have a number of options presented to me. The first one is whether I'm basing my invoice on the actual time and costs we've incurred or against the quotation that I have sent to my client and they accepted. I then have two further options, and these are essentially our deposits. These are our, if we're invoicing in advance, I might invoice for a specific percentage of the job ahead of time. Or it may be that I'm invoicing for a fixed amount. If I say you must pay a £500 deposit, then it may be that I can do it that way. It's entirely up to me. I can predefine the description if I wish to, so that's all right. But again, you can say I then have the date of my invoice as well. For the moment, I'm not going to raise a deposit invoice. I'm simply going to base this on the quotation itself. So I'm going to click on quoted or estimated, and I'm going to click into my save, and it's going to present me with the invoice in its entirety. So what we will then have is the invoice details at the top. Currently, this is a draft invoice. We can see when the invoice is raised and when it's due for payment. We can see who is going to receive the invoice. We can put a description against the invoice if we wish to. And we can see that we've then got the job information as well. So we've got the job description. We've got, again, what the name of the job is. And we've got then the individual line items that were presented to us as part of that quote. Notice that this is not looking at my actuals because, for example, design was only 2 hours so far, not 10. And we can see whether we want to include items in this invoice or in a future invoice. So right now, I'm getting rid of everything else, and I'm only going to invoice for my materials and for my design work. So where are my materials? This is where the dyslexia kicks in. I must find it. There it is. We'll get that one. And we can see that this is then giving us values against our invoice. So we've got our £1,000 for our design, and we've got our £125 for our cost. So there's the total of our first invoice. You can see what that is leaving. You can see what the gross profit would be so far. So again, at this stage, all it's giving us is that save and approve option. When I do so, if I am integrated with Xero, saving and approving the invoice is the point which will push it across to your Xero platform. You have choices here. If you're not integrated with Xero, or if you prefer, you can send your invoice from WorkflowMax itself. So rather like your quotation, you can either use a default template or you can use a custom invoice template. It is entirely up to you. So you can see the content of this. Are we grouping these by phases and folders? Are we showing the individual contents? What is it that we're doing? Either way around, we're seeing everything that we want to present to the client. Let's say we don't want to show rates or quantities. That's entirely up to us. So again, I can say I don't want to see any rates there. I just want to see the time. If I then generate that, you'll see what that does. So that is then giving us time and quantities and amounts as opposed to individual rates. So lots of things that we can do there. Or again, very, very similarly, we can choose a different template if we've set one up. From there, just the same principle of emailing that out or physically exporting that as a PDF. It's entirely up to us, but we've got that control right there, right then. We'll come back to the job and we'll see what that has then done. So if I just click back through to our job record, there we are. We can go to our financial tab. We can see we've then got, as we go down to it, our invoice, our quote, and our purchase order all listed for us under these financials. You can still see that we do have actual time and costs available to invoice against. That is because right now we've invoiced against the content of the quote as opposed to these items that we've physically raised. So these are sitting there almost as a yardstick compared to what we've invoiced to date. If we get to the point where we're raising a final invoice, that will essentially wash everything up. It will get rid of anything else and say, right, you've done it, you've finished it, it's the last thing that you're doing. We'll clear down these estimated billings and bring everything back to a conclusion, essentially. That obviously we would do once we had finished the process within our job. So lots that we would still continue to do with this. As we complete tasks, we can tick them off as done. That's, again, wrong place. We can tick it off as done over there. If you did need to delete a task as no longer required, you could delete it. You can highlight it and remove it. But again, that doesn't remove it from your quotation, just from your physical list within the job. The same is true, again, if you know that you've received certain costs, you don't have to go through a purchase order process. You can flag these as actual as and when they occur, and they then simply become part of your billing process at that point. So lots that you can do to control this. One task remaining, one task to go, one day to go. Really a very, very simple process. So we've got quite a bit of content there. We've got a number of questions still outstanding. Let me come back to where we were. We've gone through timesheet entry in one basic sense. I suppose let's have a look at another, just to give you some context around that. If I was just on my dashboard, I would have access to a lot of information about my jobs. So you can see, for example, the time that I've recorded is being displayed against my weekly productivity. I can see any tasks that I've been assigned to. I can see any jobs that I'm assigned to that are current right now. I have a number of overdue ones as well. I can see the quote history if it relates to me specifically. And again, if I'm in a senior position, I might have things like WIP and debtors visible to me as well. So all sorts of information on my dashboard. Within my quick add, I have the ability to record my time. I can either enter time or enter a weekly timesheet. We'll have a look at both. If I click on to enter time, it's very similar to what we saw in the timer at the top. It's just presented slightly differently. Here, I would select my job. So again, type in the name of the job if I can physically type. Shop fit out, select that, select the task. Notice I've only got one task left. That is because my first task was marked as complete. So again, if I pick installation, put in my hours against installation, put my notes in if I had any, and save it. And again, that will then show me my summary of my week. So there is my 7 hours today, and it's all been worked on this as 2 separate timesheet entries. Notice the first one is in green. I completed that task, so it's now fixed. I also invoiced that task, so that is now fixed as well. So there are a number of reasons why we might not be able to edit something once it's actually being dealt with in certain ways. But I can also do things like a weekly timesheet entry. So here, if I click onto weekly timesheet, you'll see this is presented to me in a different fashion. It's almost like a grid at this point. So if I'm happy that I've got what I need in here, I could, for example, say that I had worked an hour a day. by simply using my tab key and moving through what I've got on those individual days. Very, very simple. If I need to add my notes, I can click onto that small speech bubble next to the time entry, put in my notes, and then hit the tick to save those, and it simply adds those to the timesheet itself. So very, very manageable in terms of adding that information on a weekly basis. In any aspect, whether I'm dealing with weekly timesheets or monthly or daily timesheets, beg your pardon, then what I would have at the end of the process is the ability to then submit my time and say that that's it. I've now closed off my week. I'm happy that I've done everything that I need to. It will give you a warning, does tell you this will lock your timesheet for the week. But again, if you feel that you've missed something, you can always get an administrator to open that up again for you, and you can continue working on it. So really very, very simple stuff. Within the job records itself, I would say, and again, if we just use this hyperlink to click through to the job, there are other timesheet entries available as well. So again, within the timesheet entries section, if you have the privilege to do so, then you can actually enter time here as well. So I can pick somebody, I can say what time they've spent, and I can say what it was on. I can say what date it was on as well. So I can be very, very proactive about that, just even within the job record. Because of the power behind that, not everybody will have access to that section, but bear it in mind that it is a potential way that you can enter time. We've seen pretty much everything in terms of the life cycle of our job, except perhaps for reporting. If we come back to our introduction, just that life cycle there, we've seen that we have reporting still to look at. Reports within the system are in only a couple of places. I would say the first one, you have the reportable options within your job itself. The most common within here, I would say, is your financial summary. This is really, really useful. This as a measuring tool to say how are we progressing with our work is exceptionally helpful. So what we will see here is that in this financial summary table at the top, we can see what our estimated costs were, what our quoted value was for certain items, and then compare that to our actuals. So in terms of our installing, our estimated cost was 1,500. We've spent 420. You can see our billable value in the quote was 2,250. Here, currently, the time spent was worth 630. So if we ended it there, we're going to make a massive amount of additional profit. You can see in terms of the shop floor design, again, we had no estimated cost against that, but we did say it was billable at £1,000. Right now, we've spent £120 on this, but only a billable value of £180 was assigned to that time. So again, we've actually won quite a bit in terms of what we've invoiced, except for the fact that we didn't expect any cost at all based on what we told the system. You can see the same is also true for your costs as well. So where we had our materials, we can see that that's come in exactly on budget, and it mirrors what we had in our quotation as well. This is the tip of a very large iceberg. There are a huge number of reports available to you in the system. If you click on reports and reports, you'll see that you then have an awful lot of reporting that you can achieve within WorkflowMax. So this would be mainly to begin with standard reporting, whether this be on time, whether this be on invoices, whether this be on work in progress, which is essentially looking at anything unbilled in your system. Then we've got all of this that you can access in terms of understanding the progress of your business. In addition to that, you can build custom reports within the system as well. Now, we could take a day on its own just to go through custom reporting, but it's hugely flexible and hugely powerful. Essentially, this gives you the ability to create reports of your own design, covering any aspect of the information contained within the system. We've just about reached our hour at the minute, but we do have a number of questions left. We'll skip quite quickly to the questions and answer section, and we'll see what we can answer for you within here. So let's just see what we've still got. So how do we archive clients? How do archive clients show up in reports? Well, they show up in reports the same as any other client. If you want to put a filter onto your report to say that we don't want to include archive clients, you can certainly do so. So that, again, with so many things within the system, custom reporting allows you that flexibility to really narrow these down and give you what you want. Can you allocate 2 clients to a job? Unfortunately not. So a job is very specifically about one particular client. If it's a case that it's broken down across a number of people, you might want to think about how you want to refer to that. Is it that we break the job in half and we have certain aspects of that between several different clients? We can do that. Again, you might want to then, if you're looking at using the premium version of WorkflowMax, you can group your clients together at that rate. Again, different ways that you can achieve that, potentially even through the use of custom fields. Where do we mark costs as actual? So let's come back to your job and have a look at that. So again, if I just move back to jobs and jobs, again, you'll see that at the top of your jobs list here, it's showing any jobs that were starting today. We will have 1, which is the job that we were dealing with. Really easy way to filter the list, just to get back into the one that we're using. And in here, as we scroll down, we saw that jobs or costs that were being included in a purchase order and then receipted were automatically flagged as actual. The other way of doing it is by manually changing this slider. So printing hasn't gone through a purchase order, but I'm going to slide it on to say that it's an actual cost. Really nice and straightforward. For new progress invoices, based on a quote or estimate, what is the difference between fixed pricing and calculated pricing? That's a very, very good question. So what we have within your invoices, both final and progress, is an ability to raise an invoice and price it in different ways. I'm going to raise a final invoice on our job just now. So looking at what we've got, you can see that it's containing, if I just base it on the quote, it doesn't matter whether it was quoted or actual, the same basic principles apply. I'm going to move on to the body of the email, of the invoice, not email. And we will see that we've then got a pricing mode selector here. We can choose between fixed price and the default begins as calculated price. The calculated price is obvious. It's taking the amount of time or the quantity and multiplying it by the rate or the unit price to produce a final amount of a cost to the client, as it would be. If I don't agree with that, if for whatever reason I need to change that, I can move this to a fixed price. What that will introduce is a manageable box on the right-hand side. So here we've got our calculated price, but I can now state that this is now going to be, let's say, 3,000. Maybe there's been an extension, maybe we want to charge something more, whatever it might be, we can amend what we've got. So then I can do anything that I like to increase or decrease the value of our time and costs to the client. As soon as I approve that, obviously that then becomes fixed at that point. But yes, it's a really useful tool for managing the physical value that you want to charge the client, as opposed to just relying on the calculation. Can you unlock all costs in one go? Good question. I will have a look. So let's have a look at a different job. We've closed that one off with a final invoice now. So everything is essentially actual costs at that time. If I come back to a different job, let's just pick a test job, see if we've got any costs listed. Hopefully I do. I do. You can see that on the right-hand side, there is no bulk selector. So if you've got lots and lots of costs in your job, then you will have to, if you've got them marked as estimated at the moment, you'll have to go through each one and flag it as actual. If we highlight at the top, the only option it gives you there is to delete them. So it's not exactly the same sort of process. I would say if your costs need to be actuals for the greater part, you might want to look at setting any sort of template or default settings to say that your costs begin as actuals in the first place. Usually you'll find this controlled under a job template, but there might be other ways that you could look at doing that as well. In my productivity summary widget, I take it this is a premium subscription. Yes, it is. So again, what you will find is that the standard version of the system does still show you your time entry, but it doesn't necessarily have that productivity margin, let's say. When we're using the premium version of the product, we will see that that then essentially gives us the ability to put a billable target on ourselves or on our staff members. So you might say that you're 75% target, so you need to be 75% of your time spent as billable. Which invoice would I use if I don't use quotes to charge by cost? So again, the idea of a quote is just one way of managing your jobs. If you don't use quotes, then when you raise an invoice, if let's say it doesn't matter which one, progress or final, we would have the ability to use an actual time and costs invoice. Now, what that will do is it will ignore whether or not we have a quote and look at using just the information contained in the job. So what time have we physically recorded? What costs have we recorded as actuals? And it will include those as the content of our invoice. So there, I've got one actual cost. I've got no actual time, but there, that is ready to be included as part of my actual time and costs invoice. Let me just save that one as a draft for now. Can we produce WIP now? Can we product WIPs? What does that mean? Can we product WIPs now? I'm not sure what your question is, Tracy. I'm sorry about that. I'll try and give you a quick overview of the WIP in the system. So what we would have within here is under your drop-down, you've got work in progress under business. Now, this is then showing us anything in the system that is yet to be invoiced for. So what we will see is we have our headline figures at the top. And as we scroll down, we have a list of our individual jobs. And what that's then doing is telling us the value of any time that we had within them, of any costs, of any deposits or interim invoices. So those invoices that were based on either a percentage of a quote or just a simple amount, as opposed to actuals or quoted invoices. And then our total WIP figure at the end. So this is, again, just extremely useful to help you understand what is billable to your clients. If you want to bill something, you can actually do so from here. You can select it. You can raise your invoice for it. You can use your details to control the content of the invoice. And when you create that, it will tell us that that's happened. And we can then go and view that invoice by simply clicking on View Details at the top. So again, from there, this will appear as a draft within our invoices section. But if I look at that now, we'll just let that progress through. We'll see. Well, we will see by then going to invoices, and we'll be able to see that under our draft invoices, we will have exactly that. So let's have a look at our drafts just now. There is our invoice to Nexus just there. We have, I think, only a couple more questions. I'll quickly try and get those through. How do we put a bill on so that the cost code pulls through to zero? That's a good question. It's probably a little bit more detailed than we would go into mostly in this session, but in the background of the system, if we go into business and settings, we actually have a list of costs that we can predefine. Now, those costs can then have other information included against them. So in other words, we can specify particular account codes that we might want to use within Xero for those items. So for example, here, I've got this particular item right now, and if I look at floors, I can say, well, in terms of my income account, what code do I want to use? In terms of my cost of sale account, when I'm buying the item, where do I want that to go to? So these give me a lot of predefined information and save a lot of time when we're dealing with the integration with Xero. How do I get a task to pull through to Xero? Well, again, your invoice should automatically do that depending upon the settings that you've got within your integration. We will be running other webinars that will go into further detail about things like integrations. So again, certainly do be aware that a lot of the information you see in Xero will be controlled through how you're dealing with that in your integration settings in WorkflowMax. When you've integrated the two products, it will give you the basics of how that is pulling information across to Xero. What we got there? There been oh, thank you. Been extremely useful. Thank you very much for that. That's a nice bit of feedback. Thanks for that, Peter. Frank, is there a way to include the contact name on job settings? Contact name on job settings. Let me export information. There would be in terms of a number of different options. So you could, for example, have a custom report that would include that information. I would say that in terms of other things, yes, absolutely. It depends what information is appearing on your job record on screen. But certainly in terms of the contact record, that's already part of your default job information. It's just then a case of where you want to surface that. So if I was looking at any job record, we will see that does appear within here. So there's our contact that we would see, but we might also be able to then include other information around the contact as custom information, as we said. I think that's pretty much at the moment. This was the first one today, so it's just a bit of a tuning up, but thank you so much for your attendance. Hope it's been useful. Look forward to presenting this to you again fairly shortly, but yes, in the meantime, I wish you well with your early years of WorkflowMax by BlueRock. Have a great day, folks, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Thanks for now. Take care.